Let's calculate absolute change. So as we get into this, let's first talk about what does change mean, right? So oftentimes when we think of the word change, we think of the word difference. So think about if you buy something and it's $4 and you give them a $10 bill. The change you receive is the difference in the amount you paid and the amount the item cost, right? So difference is kind of what we mean when we say change. So to calculate absolute change, we will take the final value minus the initial value, and notice we have absolute value bars because this is absolute change. It's absolute value because we are talking about the difference between the amounts. We don't care positive or negative. It's about the difference between the two. Now, sometimes I like to say new minus old because that's easier to stick in my head than final value minus initial value, but it's the same thing, okay? Old meaning initial, new meaning the most recent or the final. Okay, so the absolute change is the absolute value of the final value minus the initial value. Now, why does that make sense? This is my example here. If you buy a shirt that's on sale, you don't say to your best friend, I got negative $3 off the shirt. That doesn't make any sense. We would say, I got $3 off, right? It's absolute change. So even though the amount was negative that came off, right, because we subtract, it's still an absolute change. So we always want the positive result, and that is what we get when we have absolute value. Okay, let's look at two examples. Shay works hard to drink 64 ounces of water each day. On a recent visit, her doctor told her, due to her level of activity, she really should target at least 90 ounces of water a day. What is the absolute value in the amount her doctor encouraged and what she had been drinking? Okay, so what her doctor encouraged is going to be our final value. Oops, can't spell value. Okay, so the final value is what the doctor encouraged, and what she had been drinking would be the initial. So we could also think about that as what she started with, right? That's the old value because it was initial, right? At the beginning, way back when, old. So let's remember that absolute change is the absolute value of the final value minus the initial value. Let's plug in the numbers that we have. I know my final value is 90 because the doctor encouraged 90 minus the initial value of 64. 90 minus 64 is 26, and the absolute value of 26 is 26. The absolute change is 20, well, in this case, 26 ounces if we want a label. So that's the idea. Let's go on to our second example. The first race of the season, Derek ran the 100-meter dash in 12.4 seconds. On the last race of the season, Derek ran it in 10.8. What was the absolute change? Let's first diagnose the initial and final. So the final is the last thing that happened, right? So this is our final value. And the first time he did it would be the initial value. Let's look at our absolute change is the absolute value of final value minus initial value. Let's plug in what we have. So 10.8 minus 12.4. We end up with the absolute value of a negative 1 6/10, and the absolute value of that is a positive 1.6. So the absolute change is 1.6. Now, if we would put this into a sentence, we would say Derek dropped 1.6 seconds off his 100-meter dash time. So notice, even though it was a decrease, right, it went down, we still have an absolute change of a positive number because Derek ran it in 1.6 seconds less than what he did at the beginning of the season. And that is calculating absolute change.